IMAX is lying to you. You might think of IMAX as these bigger than life screens, a movie-going experience that provides the most immersion you can possibly get. But what if I told you a lot of these IMAX screens are just slightly bigger than what you might typically see in a regular movie theater, yet you're probably paying close to double the price? And what if I told you you probably haven't seen true IMAX? That's because IMAX is a couple of things. On one hand, they're a camera company. And on the other hand, they're a projection and screen company. And then on this magical third hand I'm introducing, IMAX is also a brand. This is a story about the strange world of IMAX, a story about how a relatively niche camera company took over Hollywood, and how it might be the future of movie theaters.
IMAX Movies.
IMAX sales providing a big bump to this film.
IMAX.
That's my own personal favorite format.
It's the highest quality imaging format ever devised. It gives you an incredible sense of immersion.
IMAX has been around since 1971, but it wasn't about the biggest blockbusters. In fact, it wasn't even close. For the first couple decades it was around, IMAX was mainly used for experimental documentaries. The very first IMAX movie was just 17 minutes long. The company was started by 3 experimental filmmakers who really just wanted to figure out a way to make the biggest and best film-going experience possible. They built a couple of IMAX special theaters, some that were standalone and others that were a part of museums. The company started to see some modest success with their documentaries, museum films, and experimental showcases. But overall, it was still an extremely niche product, and IMAX was failing to turn a profit. Things weren't looking great. Something seriously needed to change. That brings us to 2002. At this point, IMAX thought instead of using this for experimental filmmaking, why not bring it to actual movies? So IMAX got to work on the digital media remastering system. This was a piece of tech that allowed the company to remaster films to fit the IMAX format. They remastered 2 films, Apollo 13 and Star Wars Episode 2. Fun fact, both of these movies had to be shortened by about 30 minutes due to the projector limits at the time. And this initiative was a relative hit, actually giving people an excuse to go to the IMAX theaters. And over the next couple of years, more and more movies were being digitally remastered for IMAX. This went on for a couple of years with some decent success, until something radical happened. July 18th, 2008. Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight was released in theaters, and this movie, it changed everything. Instead of having the movie go through the digital remastering process, Christopher Nolan instead decided to use the IMAX 70mm cameras to film the movie. Why hadn't anyone done this before? Well, the cameras are incredibly difficult to use, and not to mention extremely loud. And it was also 4 times more expensive to film with. But despite these limitations, Nolan shot about 28 minutes worth of footage using these cameras. But this didn't just yield some mind-blowing scenes for the movie. It also made a ton of money. There were less than 150 screens playing the IMAX version of The Dark Knight, but they were responsible for 10% of the revenue for the movie. This set off a light bulb. People like this, and we can charge more money for it. Now that they had the momentum, IMAX started to get aggressive, putting their movie screens everywhere. Well, sort of. So now, instead of trying to find and search for an IMAX theater near your city, your local theater might just have an IMAX screen. These things started to pop up everywhere, but something was a little off. This is a regular movie theater screen. Pretty big, right? And this is an IMAX screen coming in at 76 by 97 feet. This is the epitome of what IMAX is all about. A larger than life screen that makes it feel as if you're watching a movie on the side of a skyscraper. This thing is just unreal. But wait, this is also an IMAX screen. And it's not all that much bigger than a regular movie theater screen. Yet, it's double the price, and the quality isn't nearly as good as regular IMAX. As you can see, not all IMAX screens are created equal, and IMAX doesn't even necessarily have a standard size. But that's only part of the story. I'm sorry if this is getting a bit confusing, but to be honest, when I was researching this story, I was confused too. What even is true IMAX? Besides the actual screen size, IMAX can be boiled down to 3 different versions. The first and best version is 70mm. This is what purists would call true IMAX. It's displayed in the signature IMAX aspect ratio of 1.43 by 1, giving the film an almost square look. I'll be honest, you probably haven't even seen this version of IMAX before, and that's because it's incredibly limited and it's slowly going extinct. Since 2016, there's only been 9 blockbusters that have used the 70mm cameras. Oppenheimer was filmed in 70mm, but it was only available on 31 screens worldwide. And Dune Part 2 was also available in the same format, but it was only available on 12 screens. Quick side note, Dune Part 2 wasn't filmed with 70mm cameras, but instead it was up-resed and then they put it on film anyways, which according to some people may have actually made the film look a little bit worse. But anyways, why is 70mm so rare? Well, it's incredibly expensive, both from a filmmaking and projection standpoint. The camera is incredibly loud, making it nearly impossible to shoot quieter scenes. And it can only shoot for 3 minutes at a time. Not only that, but the projectors are also becoming more and more limited due to how expensive and clunky they can be. Like, 70mm films are massive. Just look at this thing. And then you have the next best thing to 70mm, and that's digital IMAX, or LIMAX as some of the purists might call it. When you think of IMAX, this is probably what comes to mind. There's a couple of key differences between this and the 70mm version. It's in an aspect ratio of 1.90 by 1, which gives you more height on the top and the bottom. It's a lot bigger than a normal aspect ratio, but it still isn't as mind-blowing as regular IMAX. This format also uses 2 different 2K projectors that also have some sort of IMAX post-production techniques. This provides a sharper image than what you normally get, but the biggest difference might be the cameras they use. Like I said, the IMAX 70mm cameras can be pretty unwieldy and expensive, so IMAX came up with a solution that certifies certain cameras. When movies are filmed with these cameras, it can mean a bunch of different things. In the case of Top Gun Maverick, certain scenes were displayed in the true IMAX aspect ratio despite being filmed digitally. But for Avengers Endgame, it was filmed entirely with IMAX digital cameras, but was displayed in the IMAX digital aspect ratio. So these are all great in their own way, and personally, I don't have an issue paying more to get better visuals and a bigger screen, even if one format is clearly superior to the other. But there's another IMAX format that I don't really like and is a bit more frustrating. Notice anything different about these posters? Some say filmed for IMAX, while others say experience it in IMAX. Now, to 99% of people, they're gonna see these posters and think, cool, we're gonna see a movie in IMAX. But in reality, these posters are saying 2 very different things. The filmed for IMAX movies are the ones we talked about earlier. The ones with different cameras, different projectors, aspect ratios, stuff like that. But these experience it in IMAX movies mean a completely different thing. They're not filmed with special cameras and they don't have a different aspect ratio. Due to the digital remastering system, the movie might look a little bit better, and IMAX theaters also do have pretty good sound systems, so that's also a plus. But in a lot of ways, and to most people, these experience it in IMAX movies are just the same movies you would see otherwise. But it's now being projected onto a bigger screen. In some cases, that screen might not even be that much bigger than what you'd normally get. But at the end of the day, these screens do need to play something. If they didn't play anything, IMAX would probably go back to the position they were back in the 70s. The saturation on the movie industry has allowed IMAX to become the leading format when it comes to premium screens. Like, remember when 3D used to be the biggest thing? Now you don't hear about it as much, and that's because IMAX in a way has replaced it. Movie theaters are always going to try to find the next premium format in order to get people to pay more money for it. But at least this time, we have an experience that can actually be pretty amazing, even if it is misleading at times. But for the next time you go to the movies, now you know. For the true IMAX experience, just read the poster.